Hello, my friends. I am back. I'm so good to be back. And before we go, I wanted to say that I've made the decision, I'm making a commitment that I'm going to do this live streaming on Saturdays and sometimes also on Sundays every week. So if you want to catch up, if you want to give me feedback, come and join. If you want to watch it later, it's going to be stored in my LinkedIn profile and also on X and on YouTube. So that's what we are doing. And today I wanted to talk to you about the concept of privacy, and I wanted to connect it to digital IDs, and also to kind of cover a little bit the myth of Chinese social credits. And we cannot obviously miss the 4-hour conversation between Lex Fridman and Pavel Durov. So buckle up. We have some topics to cover. So first of all, UK and Switzerland in different forms adopted the projects of digital IDs. And I have to say that people who support these projects of digital IDs, they often say that this is the future, this brings efficiencies, that makes things easier. And people who are against digital IDs often say that this is an expansion of the totalitarian state, that this is the like a compromise of privacy, and we are ending up in some kind of Orwellian state. And I do feel that we have to have a little bit more nuanced conversation. And that's what I'm going to bring it, because hopefully if more people consider the dangers of digital ITs, we could implement some kind of adjustments how these projects are being implemented. So in my opinion, the first concept that is missing from the digital ID conversation is the question who owns the ID and who operates that. So for example, in my opinion, the ID, the identity is owned by the person, and the government is a body, a service provider operating this, or providing the connectivity, so to speak. And why this is important? Because let's say if the government decides that they want to deny you access to the digital ID, they would be in breach of their service agreement, and therefore, it can only be done if the court made the decision, if the judge made the decision that this service of digital ID connectivity can be denied. Or if the government gets hacked and your data are being exposed wherever, then the government should, since this is an operator of the digital ID service, the government needs to be liable for potential damages and consequences. I feel this conversation is completely missing. And people kind of assume that if this is a governmental service, they have to have the right to organize themselves and impose their own SLAs and whatnot. And my point is no, because we are giving to the government our identity information, our personal data, and the government is supposed to operate this digital ID service in a safe, secure, and legitimate way. So that's my first point. Create an SLA with the government and make them responsible, A, to be liable for the bad service or hacks or breaches of privacy, and B, they cannot deny this service unless there is a court decision. So that's my first, I would say, condition, or at least the type of the conversation that needs to be happening before this digital ID services go in live. And the second, even more like important condition, I believe needs to be imposed before these projects go live, is the fact that you can never, ever, under any circumstances, use this digital ID to access financial services and medical records, ever. Because this is where all the risks are. This is what Edward Snowden was warning us about. This is what Assange and his revelations were warning us about. it's the connection between the government health information or like, your private information and money. And a lot of people would say, oh, this would be great if I could use the credentials of my digital ID to access my bank so that I don't have to do the KYC. No, like, if you ask me, it's like a hard no under no circumstances. We should be completely against any kind of shortcuts or easiness or whatever simplifications where credentials of your digital ID could be used to access your bank, your Revolut, your Bitcoin, and your medical records ever. It should be forbidden because this is where the risks are. And the legal reason, the regulatory reason why I believe it should be so is that usually when you read the privacy law says that whoever has access to your private information needs to have a legitimate interest. This is a part of GDPR, this is the part of the UK privacy law, this is the part of Swiss privacy law. Like any country that has the Privacy Act or a similar law has that provision. And I think we could legitimately argue that private information of individuals as well as their financial information is very, very sensitive, and granting default rights or default connections to your medical and financial information to the government that is simply a technical service has zero default legitimate interests. That's pretty much my stance, and I'm going to die on this hill if necessary. So all those people who argue that we need digital ID to simplify banking, guys, I know you want simplicity. You may be annoyed by various KYC requests, but think about long term. Like, this is what we have to be mindful of, because what you don't want is some kind of, rogue police decision or bad governmental actor who already has default connectivity to your medical records and bank accounts, because you don't want to lose access to this, and you don't want to be announced crazy, and you don't want to lose your money. So that's pretty much what I have to say about digital ID projects. So I hope when they are actually implemented in Switzerland, where I currently live, and in the UK and in any other country, these technicalities and nuances should be discussed. That's my opinion. So now let's move on to Chinese social credit system, because, guys, you won't believe it, but everything we were told, unless you are, lucky enough to go to China and actually see how it works from like people in China, you would have a lot of misconceptions about that. And when I started, studying that, because I wanted to really compare what is that our European governments are proposing versus like this Orwellian, terrible, overarching, comprehensive Chinese social credit system. This is a joke. Like, to put it simply, and I checked with a few people from China, the Chinese social credit system as like this comprehensive rating that is given to everybody and is guiding, different areas of your life. It doesn't exist. Chinese people don't know what it is. Like, seriously. So what has, been implemented in China? First, they have, and this is only for people who opted in, people who took credit. There is like a credit risk scoring database accessible for banks and other credit institutions that are participating in this system. So it's true, but it is the same. For example, in Germany, we have Schufa. In Switzerland, we have the governmental body that tracks, people who defaulted on their payment. So it's not new. And if you apply for a loan or if you apply for a mortgage, even when you like rent an apartment, people would ask you, please bring me extract or give me, the latest data from this credit rating scoring database. So it exists, and it exists in Europe. And you need to be like a credit institution to be able to access this information. What also exists is a set of different databases in China, for example, people who had criminal records or people who were involved in corruption scandals or people who held certain official positions in the government and then, somebody lost money or there was a breach of contract. And for these cases, for example, if you apply for the loan or if you want to participate in the governmental tender, you won't be allowed to do that if you or your former entity were having a record in this database. So it's not unique, it's not comprehensive, it doesn't apply to all cases, but my understanding is yes. For example, if your name is listed in the record related to unpaid debt or unpaid taxes, and you're trying to buy something expensive, you would be prevented from doing this. So that's kind of my understanding how it works. So what it doesn't do, which is kind of funny, is it doesn't have this comprehensive reach and overarching controls. I understand this is very specific, and it is very much related to certain actions that you're trying to take. And sometimes people don't even know if they're going to be checked or not going to be checked until they take a certain action, such as like buying a house or whatever. So, and they definitely don't call it like social credit system. It's not happening. There were some projects during COVID related to facial recognition, and apparently it's been abandoned. It's no longer, working. So what is also not true that your face has been scanned everywhere in China and everything is tracked. Apparently that's a myth. And another story that is completely untrue, totally being debunked, I researched it, is that these decisions are, done by machine learning, whatever, AI algorithms. Not true. Those are databases that are based on specific administrative events, such as like you had a violation, there was a court case, there was a record. So these databases are very much linked to certain events and administrative decisions. So there is no apparently AI, I understand it can search or connect certain events, but it doesn't produce the decision. That's my point. So all in all, what I realized is that Chinese social credit system, first of all, it doesn't exist in the way that we have been, scared by. And secondly, it's not very different from what we have in Europe and what people have in the US. So that's good news. That's why I kind of feel more confident and reassured that this crazy, system is not being used in China, because I don't like the idea of people creating boogeymen. And hopefully, now more people will be able to understand that China is not that different, than Europe and, America. I don't know much about Latin America and Africa, but well, we're not that different overall. So that's great. And now I also wanted to talk to you a little bit about the conversation between Lex Fridman and Pavel Durov. It's like a 4-something hour podcast. They released it a few days ago, so still this week. Go find it on YouTube or wherever you follow Lex Fridman. Of course, they talked a lot about privacy. And the reason why I feel that conversation was kind of so insightful and important is they position privacy as the fundamental attribute of being free and being safe. Because if you don't feel like you could, speak up your mind, if you don't feel that your opinion is heard and you have the means and the ways of impacting what is happening in your country, you are essentially becoming like a slave. And that's important. However, there are different ways, and apparently it relates to culture, how people feel that they want to express their opinions, their freedoms, and um, how they view social platform activities, etc., etc. So, for example, what I understand is that the prevailing opinion from the Western countries is you should be able to criticize the government, you should be able to go and take part in elections, you have to have a number of candidates there. And this is what they call like a beacon of a democratic process. However, in countries such as Russia and China, and apparently like there was some barriers, and they still exist for people from Russia and China and Iran to access Telegram. They referred back then to certain, times when these restrictions were imposed, but I wasn't clear if these restrictions are still there. But apparently, there are technical ways of people to overcoming these limitations and restrictions and still access Telegram, but that's not the point. The first point is that people should be able to decide for themselves. And what Lex and Pavel and also Tucker Carlson and many others agree on is that this assumption of some people to say, oh, this information could be harmful, or this information could be misleading, you could be manipulated, and therefore we want to restrict your access to these types of information because we don't know how smart you are. We don't know how you could, how well you could reconcile, potentially misleading information. And I find this, and they agree, completely like obnoxious and hypocritical and unjustifiable at all. So Pavel gives this example that when Russia-Ukraine war started, they were considering removing Telegram from both countries because they were afraid and concerned that people would create channels with like a governmental propaganda or spread news about violence. And he just wanted to remove it from both countries so that Telegram is not being abused. And then people from both countries, and I actually was touched, but I also feel this is so profound. People from both countries said, who do you think you are? You're not our babysitter. We don't want you to babysit us. We can decide which channels we read. We can decide which channels we join. Like, you have no place to deciding what is harmful, what is useful, what is necessary, what is unnecessary for us. And he's like, wow. So I think this is very important because it is my understanding that for people from like Russia and China, and I heard the same things from people in Iran, and probably Ukraine is similar. The way how we view like freedom of opinion and privacy and freedom in general is more not like our relationship with the government, but our ability to interact within our community. If I feel like within my community, I have like-minded people and we have some level of debate and we have an opinion about the government, we don't need to tell the government necessarily, hey, change your ways. But if we have the means and the tools to interact with our closed circle and have the trust of the people who are close to us. This is much more important than our ability to go and vote. And the reason why I say this, in a strange way, it is still true to me, because every time I vote, it could be elections, or it could be even Eurovision Song Contest, or some other, areas where you have to select a candidate. My choice always gets like 3%. I mean, what's the point? Yeah, but if you have the tools such as like social media and Telegram and like YouTube and others, where you could choose who you follow, who do you want to learn from, with whom do you want to share your ideas and get feedback, this is way more important for me personally than having the candidate that I support to win the elections, because for the political process, to be honest, I gave up. So anyway, so those are my recent ideas about privacy, digital IDs, and how it relates to freedom. Um, Let me know what you think, and let me wish you a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful weekend. I have a lot more ideas, so I will probably release another video tomorrow morning. But for now, have a wonderful day. Bye bye.